Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I am your host, Edgar Mills. Thanks for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome to episode 29 of the Junto Podcast. Thank you for staying with me. So what are we talking about today? Yep, crazy topic. It's in many of our lives, as we'll see here as we go, and it's very complex. Pornography is it's pervasive in our world, and generally it's frowned upon by some sections of society and celebrated by others. But what I'm trying to do here, this is neither an endorsement or indictment. I'm just trying to bring some objective perspective to see, try to parse it out a little bit. I don't know. I'm trying to exercise a little critical thinking while still maintaining what I consider to be some faith and all kinds of things like that. So again, as with everything I do and talk about, I want you to think about these things as they affect your life, and without judgment and without moral judgment or any personal judgment. Just be objective about the way you look at it. So, man, pornography. That's a big one. There's a lot of stuff going on. Pornography has been around since, I don't know, in my studies, what I'm finding here is at least 35,000 years. Yeah, 35,000 years. There's artifacts depicting some form of sensual, sexual behavior. And we know that the ancient Greeks and Romans and Mesopotamian and all those, there's a lot of, especially in art, right? But and we'll discuss here later on the fine line between art and porn. But yeah, it's been around. It's been around for a long time. As it progressed, as history kind of went on, we had in the Renaissance periods, and when painting and oil painting started becoming a thing, and as artists, I don't know, grew and developed, more and more explicit material was coming out. And what was explicit for the times anyway, but sometimes very explicit, sometimes very explicit. And then photography came along. Oh, man. When photography came along, it got crazy, right? It got stuff. You started seeing pictures of like old school, like prostitutes and madams. And never mind film, right? Never mind film. It's been around. It's been around for a long time. And then, oh my God, here we are. Well, let's talk about the 20th century. When video came around, like there's probably the very first films to be filmed were probably explicit, and some of them are out there. Some of them have been remastered and preserved and stuff like that. But what happened? There was a thing in the 60s and 70s, they called it the sexual revolution, right? In 1972, the film Deep Throat. Now, many people may not know about that, but that was maybe the first pornographic film to be released in mainstream theaters. And, then it went crazy from there. And then VHS came along. Then in the mid-90s, we had the internet came along. Yep, the internet. And nowadays, I mean, there isn't a pornographic subject or category that can't be explored. Yeah, it's out there. It's everywhere. For good or bad, it's out there. So first, I'm going to explore what are some of the benefits of consuming pornography. Now, I'm not trying to alienate. I'm sure a lot of my listeners are Christians. I'm not trying to alienate you. Stay with me. But you're going to hear a few key words throughout this, all right? Moderate use of pornography for, spicing up the bedroom or whatnot. Yeah, moderate use. Yeah, you can You and your wife or husband, you can spice it up. And if you're a moderate person, and if you're a sane and stable human, you can enjoy it for what it is. It's just sort of visual stimulus. It's okay. And there's so much out there to choose from that, there's pornography that targets couples. There's very romantic depictions of things. Now I don't want to get a lot into content because there's something, it's all out there. But if you're kind of chubby, and you're looking at some chubby porn, and you're like, oh yeah, well there you can body acceptance is what I'm getting about, right? You start to see that there's other humans out there like you enjoying things like sex. You don't have to be a recluse or whatever. What else? I mean, stress relief. Yeah. Sometimes just rub one out and that's relaxing. So there are some benefits. And now how deep do those benefits go? We don't know. Let's see. I'd say that if you and your wife, you and your lover, you and your husband, you explore a little bit in the bedroom, try some new things in a healthy way, try some new things. It might help you open up the conversation a little bit where you might have been embarrassed to talk about a thing. You watch it on the video there and you're like, oh, what do you think about that? And it might open it up a little bit. And there are some surveys out there that people talk that kind of link a little bit of sexual well-being, a little bit of improvement in young women, and oddly enough. Now, mind you, I'm going to keep going back and saying mentally and emotionally stable people. Yeah, you can explore some curiosities. You can even use it for education, sex education, and in some degrees, to help you and your husband and wife, achieve orgasm. Even now, obviously, there's a fine line there, fine line. So those are just a few things, and those are legitimate things. If in a small number of the population, who knows? Excuse me. So, and I've always been on the side of look, folks. I'll be honest with you. I still consume porn a little bit here and there. I've always enjoyed art. I'm a big fan of art, and erotic art is enjoyable. I like it. I like to see the different artists' styles and takes, and if it's a little sexual, whatever. And yeah, and I've always thought about that. I've always been an individualist, and even before I was a Christian, I've always thought that I had a very healthy position on that. But we all know that there are multiple deep and severe risks to porn consumption, health risks, and I'm not talking about gaining weight. I'm talking about like anxiety and depression and general instability in your relationship. Yeah. This stuff, depending on your rate and extreme consumption, might create, well, it does. It changes the neural pathways in your brain. It creates different. So along with this anxiety or depression, you might have developed some, I don't know, misogyny and sexism. Mostly, well, I don't know about mostly, but a lot in porn is, women are sort of objects. There's a lot of violent porn out, folks. There's a lot of all kinds. I keep trying to refrain from the content. There's so much. We could be here for a 48-hour, 72-hour marathon talking about the content of the different pornography out there. But look, it's a definite, well-documented fact that the earlier you're exposed to porn, the more likely you are to have behavioral issues and like long-term, deeply ingrained issues. like misogyny, like violence toward women. Yeah, it's out there. That stuff you can't deny that exists. You can I'm just saying consumption, but really addiction, right? That's what changes the brain. Now, we're talking about porn. You can be addicted to alcohol or gambling, or you can be addicted to a lot of things. And if you have an addictive personality, I mean, likely chances are you will be addicted. But what this addiction and this over consumption of porn does is it kind of rewires your brain's reward system, right? And just like drugs, you need more and more. And then it needs to be more and more extreme because this thing that you liked, it's not doing it anymore. So you need more and more and more. And that's how addiction works. Yeah, that's how it creates neurological shifts in your brain. Now, in today's age, man, it's difficult. They're on the internet, like your kids out there in the wild, even if you don't let them have phones, which you shouldn't, by the way. One of their friends has a phone. And if their parents are irresponsible and they don't have any child blocks on that phone, there's somebody out there showing your kid. I don't care what age you're talking about. If they're in a public school, even private school, some kid is showing them some wildly inappropriate shit. You have to be aware of that. It exists, folks. It exists, and it's happening. So be very mindful of that, because once they're hooked, once they're addicted, it don't matter again if it's porn, if it's drugs, or whatever. That begins a life of problematic behavior. We talked about the anxiety and depression, but then extreme sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Expectations on body types, like of your own body. You watch porn out there and there's some 25-year-old dude who's ripped and has a 10-inch penis, and you're looking at yourself like, whoa, 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 am I normal? Right? If you got some 12-year-old kid seeing that and he's like, my God, is that normal? Well, is it? And not just in boys, especially in women, right? The porn has shaped the modern society in such a way that women pay lots of money these days to alter themselves to essentially look like porn stars. You got the lips and the ass lifts and the big boobs and the tans and the paint on eyebrows and all that shit and the ridiculous clothes. All that is to mimic what, I don't know, probably in the 80s and 90s was they tried to glamorize porn, to the point that it seemed, glamorous. And these days now you got women who pay big money to look like this. Do they act like that? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. But it creates these mental issues that have deep and lasting impact, folks. Deep and lasting impact. And there's study after study. Look, I'm reading notes right now, but every point I'm making, there's like 4 studies attached to it from mentalhealth.com, or a study by Vier and Griffiths, IFS and Perry, 2025, Culture Reframed, 2023. There's so many studies, which is, it's not bizarre. It makes sense because we're always trying to find the sources, right, of behavior problems, of criminal activity, of all that. And again, I go back to childhood. Early exposure by children will increase and distort their view of the opposite sex and objectification and then risky behaviors. Yeah. From boys and girls. And what's a thing that sort of, what's a trigger for that? Anybody? Yeah. Early childhood trauma and sexual abuse. Yep. When your shithead uncle wants to put his penis in your butthole when you're 8 years old, you're going to be impacted by that mentally and psychologically. Yeah. Early childhood trauma, sexual abuse then leads to, or can lead to, early exposure, or that might have been a part of the exposure to pornography. And then you grow up trying to wonder why you're all fucked up. Protect your kids, good people. Protect them at all costs. The kids are vulnerable. We know this. We'll elaborate on it here in a little bit. Relationships, man. So some of this, like I said, there's some porn out there that's couple-based porn. It's all romantic and stuff, but there's a lot that's very violent, very objectifying. And then could this have an effect on your empathy and the way you view your partner? It could. Could overconsumption of pornography have an effect on your ability to have satisfying sex? At some point, your kinks and fetishes expand beyond what your mate is able to or willing to do with you or for you. And couldn't that trigger a little resentment or aggression even? Yeah. So it could have effect. And never mind. What if you're sneaking around and watching porn and hiding it, and then your wife finds out? Yeah, that can have an effect on your relationship, can it? Maybe that's a discussion that needs to be had. So the psychology of pornography as it affects you as a consumer, right? The way you consume pornography, it probably is triggered by some early traumas or early exposure. And then it can have long-term mental health impacts, ultimately affecting your relationships with anyone, but especially women. And if you're already married, then it might be having an effect on your relationship as you're married. So there's deeper psychology there and it has been studied in depth, folks. So what about, never mind the psychology of the consumers, what about the performers? What about them? In the past maybe 3 decades or so, there's, a push to normalize or to legitimize sex work. And there's different sides of that. That's a whole nother conversation. That's nuanced as well. But generally speaking, if we look at the mental health and the past traumas of the performers, we can see that there is a very abnormally high rate of sexual abuse as a child. Abnormally high instances of depression. And there's even post-traumatic stress, not just from childhood, but for performing. There has been countless porn stars who have come out with, I was going to go do this scene and they were going to pay me $200 and it was supposed to be this. And then the next thing you know, it was this, right? And it was violent or something that she didn't agree to, but in the moment, didn't have the constitution to resist or whatever. And then never mind the high drug use and things like that. But I want you to understand that when you look at these people who are performing from your place of superiority and moral high ground, you just understand that some of these people are damaged. Yeah, some of these people are damaged and have some deeply ingrained psychological and emotional issues that they have not been able to overcome. Yeah. Plenty of trauma in that industry, folks. Now, well, let's continue on. And in that, I said when you're looking at them from your place of superiority, there is to some degree a stigma on these people. Yeah, are they making a choice? They're making the choice, but they have stigma. Some of them are. Well, some of them may be involuntarily doing these things. Some of them may have substance abuse. Yeah, that's widespread there. So be mindful of that. The industry itself, though, I think we can all agree that it's probably pretty dirty. And I don't mean sexually dirty. I mean dirty like morally bankrupt. Definitely that. but the way people treat other people. And I'm not saying this forever. There's probably some great people in the porn industry. I imagine they're just like any other industry. There's shitbags and good people. You could say the same about law enforcement or if anything. You could say the same about anything. But understand that probably the vast majority of people participating in that industry were probably damaged emotionally in some way, mentally in some way, or just on substance abuse. And we'll get into the involuntary stuff in a little bit. Now, there's a small segment of that industry that kind of promote, women empowerment and try to highlight the positive health trends. The couples therapy, would watching porn together, things like that, and try to show some empowerment. But that is a very small segment. The negative health from that industry, it dominates that industry. It dominates. Moderate consumption. All things. I thought Will Rogers said it. I don't know if it was Will Rogers or Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation to include moderation. Is it? Can we consume porn moderately? If we're stable, right, and we don't have any deep issues and things like that, and we watch it for amusement, and we see the art in it, and because there is some very artistic pornography out there. That's like anything else. You do anything, you do it with a level of ethical foundation. Is it possible to ethically consume porn? I don't know. We'll see. Moderate use, yeah, like we talked about earlier. You can enhance your sexual life with your spouse. Try some new things. You can do that. There are some positive outcomes there. But what I always talk about things with a libertarian spin, and then I also always throw. I don't say a Christian spin because I don't speak for Christians, just like I don't speak for all libertarians, but from my perspective as a libertarian, as a Christian, right? Very clearly, pornography conflicts with what we consider God's view or the divine view of sexuality is. Now, to me, sex is one of the greatest gifts to mankind. It is among the most pleasurable thing in existence. Now, I've never done any drugs, folks. So I don't know the levels that you reach during that. There are some addicts out there that will tell you that that's what it is. To me, because to me, you have to be conscious to appreciate the joy. Right. You can't do anything when you're clouded with drugs or alcohol or whatever. So I think sex is one of the greatest pleasures, one of the greatest gifts from God. Yeah, I do. I believe that. But pornography is inextricably linked to lust, which is a deadly sin. And it can be linked to infidelity if you consume it in such a way that it drives you to go search out someone else other than your wife. Yeah. Is it cheating just to watch porn? If your wife knows about it and condones? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. That's between you and your wife, I suppose. Now, there is a camp out there that says all sin is equal. If you even think about it, you may as well have done it. It's sin. Sin is sin is sin. I think I disagree with that, though. I think there are levels of sin. Now, that don't mean it's okay to go do it, and that don't mean you can do the lesser sin and just slide, and you still are meant to repent. But if there weren't if all sin was equal, why would there be 7 deadly sins? Is any other sin deadly? So they're not equal, as per the Bible, if there's only 7 deadly sins. Now, does that mean all sin derives from those 7? I guess that's a way to look at it. I'm not a biblical scholar, so I can't go much deeper on that. I don't think all sin is equal. That's me personally. School me up. If you're out there, if you're one of my Christian homies, school me up. But if all sin was equal, I don't think they would have specified 7 deadly sins. It's just my opinion. But I got news for you, good people. Over 54% of Christians use pornography regularly. And that's self-professed. That's an anonymous survey. Yeah, done by Christians. And I want to say Christianity Today 2025, possibly. That's where that's from? Well, in what capacity are these Christians consuming porn? Is it just to have some spicy sex with your spouse? Is that even a sin? Is lust a sin with your wife? If you're lusting for your wife? Because is it real? I mean, once again, I think sex is one of the gifts, one of the most magical gifts from God. And I think sex was meant to be enjoyed. I think God meant for us to enjoy each other in the fullest of capacities. I don't believe sex is just to procreate. If that were the case, it wouldn't feel so good. Right? Because look, God, I do believe God created, I do believe in intelligent design, divine design. Like I said, I think it supersedes all other pleasure. Now, the pursuit of lust is definitely a sin, a deadly sin, it says. But if you make love with your wife or husband, folks, and you enjoy it to its fullest, you guys go to sleep just feeling completely satiated, just done. Is that bad? Is that not good? I think it's good. Yes, I do. Christians are out there consuming porn. Now, like I said, in all industries, there's good and bad people. In all religions, there's still shitbags walking around. Just because you're a professed Christian doesn't mean you're Christ-like. Hell, I'm probably not. I try to be in certain aspects. To me, that's my Christian journey, right? Is trying to be as good as I can be to people, right? Not only don't hurt people, but help people when they need it. I'm starting with that. I'm starting with that. 54%. Man, that's consuming porn. Never mind. There's probably a significant number of Christian men out there chasing prostitutes, cheating on their wives, all that stuff that may or may not be fueled by pornography. I reject the notion that if you cheat on your wife, it's because you look at porn. There's so many other factors involved. So I reject that. Now, folks, don't get me wrong. My wife and I have had these conversations. So don't think I'm over here just saying some weird shit. I've had those conversations. And my wife grew up in a Mississippi Pentecostal preacher as a grandfather. So sex, never mind porn, sex was stigmatized in a big way. Yeah, in a big way. So, yeah, man, and then you see an overreaction from people who are shielded or not given the true nature of sex between husband and wife. Yeah, no, we're not supposed to have sex before marriage as per the Christian doctrine. I get that. A lot of people do, folks. I did, for sure. But when it's so taboo, when you hide a thing, when you try to hide it and don't educate on it, people are going to go explore it because it's a strong, strong force. Sexuality is strong, folks. Anyway, back to the Christians. Yeah, Christian pornography use, 54%. That's is that surprising? I'm not surprised by that. Again, I count myself a Christian. If I did an anonymous survey and someone asked, I would say, yes, I consume porn. There you go. I'm one of those 54, I guess. Now, what is some of it? What other than the moral aspect of casual sex on film and all that, what's one of the things that really burns Christians up? Blasphemy, right? Blasphemy in film. So when you see pornography that is specifically religious themed, nuns or your Mormon preacher with all his little Mormon virgin concubines or whatever. I crazy stuff like that. Hell, I don't know. Maybe 54% of those Christians are out watching that kind of porn. But I get, look, folks, and I'm very much about art, the freedom, right, of expression. There was once a painting. Well, it was a photograph, it wasn't painting. I forget the guy's name. I've referenced it before. It was called, and it came out in like maybe the late 80s, early 90s. It was called Piss Christ. And it was a crucifix with Christ on the crucifix submerged in a vat of piss. And it was very, very offensive, and it created a controversy, and people tried to get it censored and all those things. And it was distasteful, for sure, and blasphemous for sure. And it was very visually striking. The color, the whole thing, and the guy was, whatever. And it was a work, and it was a series on body fluids, and there was other thing. It wasn't just a anti-religious thing. It was a little bit, but it wasn't just that. That was a component of it. So I'm always walking a line of, because blasphemy does, I mean, for me, I do not blaspheme, right? Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I don't really joke about, the creator. but from the libertarian perspective, right, you should have a freedom of expression. You should. Now, should the federal government fund that or not? That's a whole different thing. And actually, I want to say the National Endowment for the Arts lost some funding over that. There was a repercussion for that, I think. But mocking faith is not cool, whether it's an artistic expression or pornographic or literary, or some statue of Moloch sitting on the grounds of a city courthouse or whatever else. I don't think mocking faith, I don't care for that personally. It just adds to a darkness that we already have enough darkness in our society. It just adds to the darkness. Even if it's frivolous sexuality, it still adds to a darkness because you're shitting on someone's faith. All right, let's move on. The sex industry, folks. Well, there's some different numbers here. The sex industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, that's above board, and then below, there are varying numbers on the underground sex industry as far as money goes and as far as numbers of humans and this and that and the other. But you can't talk about pornography without talking about sex trafficking and stuff like that. Do I think all pornography is produced with involuntary hostages? No, I don't. I don't at all. I think there is within the industry, and it might be a small section, but I think there is an above board, a legitimate, voluntary, fairly operated, sort of a piece of that. But you cannot separate sex trafficking from pornography. So, I mean, this could be a whole nother episode, just sex trafficking alone. Never mind a result being pornography. That's just one small piece. What drives that kind of stuff? How are people kidnapped? I think there's a 2024 study, trafficking rose in 2024 by 25% from what it previously was. Now we're already almost to the end of 2025. What drives that, man? I mean, just crazy stuff. Poverty. Yeah, I guess. No, probably largely poverty. These third world conflicts. Yeah. And somewhere between 60 and 70% of traffic victims are women, female, 40% being children. That's a humongous number. Let me see here. Is there a number? 250,000 U.S. children are at risk from being trafficked for purposes of who knows what, prostitution, slavery, and all that stuff. Pornography, underground, dark web shit, that vile. I'm not meaning to go into all this stuff in such a way to be biased here. I'm just telling you, you can't separate the porn industry from sex trafficking and child exploitation and even prostitution. Now, I do, and I always have stood, and I still do stand that prostitution should be legalized. And that may sound controversial based on the things I'm saying right now. But I also think drugs and should be decriminalized. I think machine guns should be decriminalized. I think a lot of things should be done because I don't trust the government to regulate these things. But when they are decriminalized, then they are more above board. And when things can operate in the open, then they can be regulated by the free market. And government, yeah, of course. Prostitution in Germany is legal. And I think it's a pretty thriving industry in Germany. And yeah, I'll admit I have partaken. But there are medical standards. There are standards that these women have. Now, there's still violence. But check this out. If you are at a brothel in Germany and you get violent with one of those working girls, most of those brothels have big, beefy, burly, angry European type, Eastern European types that will beat the shit out of you. That's not excusing anything. I'm just saying. Things that are decriminalized are more above board. Now, does that mean decriminalize kidnapping? No, it doesn't. No. Prostitution is a result. That's a thing that goes beyond what is criminal. And who knows what's it like in Nevada, where whatever counties in Nevada that prostitution's legal. I don't even know that none of that popped up in any of my research. How those women are those women empowered, or are they're out of force? I don't know. I'm sure they have some standards for their ladies there too, though, because it's an above board business. They pay taxes, unfortunately, and they have to comply with regulations of some sort, health regulations and all those things. So look, sex trafficking and child exploitation cannot be disregarded. It cannot be disregarded. And we're going to talk about that more later. So I talked about the porn industry being a multi-billion-dollar economy. A multi-billion-dollar economy, and that's underground shit. If it were all above ground, you would think municipality, you would think American politicians would be like, yes, we need to capitalize on that. You would think. But the illicit part of that is it's half of the drive on that is the taboo of it. Now, I don't want to get conspiratorial here, but when you got all these rich people who allegedly have these ridiculous sex parties with children, it's because they're kids. It's because it's taboo. It's because they feel empowered and untouchable to do things that other people can't and wouldn't do. Do you understand the nature of the black market versus above board? And that's all very libertarian points of view on that. So yeah, there's badness. There is definite badness in all that. And I recognize it. And there are organizations out there, folks, trafficking or anti-trafficking organizations. There's one that I've been following for a long time, and I think they're awesome. And the guy who runs it is named Basil Baz, and he's a man's man. He's got long white hair. He's a tough guy. He's a genuine tough guy, and he was in the intelligence community and all this. The Association for the Recovery of Children, ARC. He's the founder and CEO of that. They've been doing business since the early 90s. And every mission they've got 100% success rate in rescuing children all across the globe from various kidnapping, sex trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. The Association for the Recovery of Children, ARC. And the men who work with that organization are all former, intelligence, military, police guys who are called, convicted to go out and try to protect the defenseless and the weak in this world. And you guys have all heard of Operation Underground Railroad. That was the movie. There was a movie, Cry Freedom. Was it Cry Freedom? With Jim Caviezel. It was a little controversial because it was highlighting the sex trafficking, and I think this was down in South America specifically. And then everybody was like, oh, well, Tim Ballard didn't do this or he didn't do that. It was a movie to highlight things. Now, there's been some controversy with Tim Ballard. He's been accused of trafficking. Now, I think they're probably baseless, but the point is that they have had a significant impact because I think Ballard also was intelligence or Homeland Security or something like that. I mean, you have to have a network of people who can help you actually collect and synthesize intelligence to be able to go and act on these things. And you got to have some kind of network of people who can get you into these countries legally and things like that. So Operation Underground Railroad. And then there's a company called Polaris that has a U.S.-based trafficking hotline. Yeah. There's a lot of them out there. Shared Hope. Truckers Against Trafficking. Yeah. There's one called Gray Bull. Now, they do rescues from war-torn countries, but it's a similar sort of thing. So these organizations are out there. Most of them are nonprofits. They rely on the largesse of the American public and the well-to-dos who genuinely want to help, not the ones who go out there and buy fucking humans for their sexual and friggin' evil pleasures. So there are good men out there doing good things. If I had something to offer to that, I would. My wife wanted me to try to reach out to Underground Railroad to work with them, to get a job. I don't think I bring anything to that table, really. I have tactical skill. That is all. I don't have a network of people. I don't know. I don't know how good I would be for that. If I reached out to any, it would be ARC. At any rate, besides that, these organizations are out there, and they're trying to cut some of that stuff off, some of the evil that exists that the porn industry doesn't necessarily promote, but it fuels. It fuels and exacerbates. We all know as long as there's a demand, somebody will fuel the supply. Somebody will provide. And does the porn industry create that demand? Huh. I don't know that it creates it from scratch, but it certainly exacerbates it. Yeah. Sex and sexuality are very powerful things, and they drive our connection. This is why men and women get together. It's a natural instinct. There's pheromones. There's body types that people do. Sometimes you look at and connect and you're like, oh my God, this person, I want to be a part of this person. And the pleasure can be immense and almost indescribable. And it can be good. It doesn't have to be exploited. It doesn't have to be ugly. It can be beautiful. But there's always the risk of addiction. If you don't take this pleasure and process it and go about it correctly, there's the risk of addiction. And then there's always the risk of exploitation. Always. It's out there. In every sector, in everything, there is always someone who will exploit what is good about this thing. It doesn't matter to industry. There are people extorting money. There are people lying and they're doing Ponzi schemes in the banking industry. There's people in any industry exploiting. There are restaurants selling you one thing and calling it this thing, but it's really something else to cut down on ingredient costs. Just crazy shit like that. There's exploitation all over the world, all over the industries, all over everything. There's some way to undercut and undermine it. Can we consume pornography ethically? Ethically. Now, look, I mean secularly here. Yes, as a Christian, it's not ethical necessarily to watch pornography. And I don't know. Again, we have to talk about this with smarter people than me. But can you and your wife, who you've been married to for 29 years, lay up in the bed, with some candles on, and throw some sexy porn on the TV, and roll around and get down and get worked up and have a great time? Yeah, that can happen. Is it ethical from a Christian perspective? Unknown. If you're assuming that all porn comes from exploitation, probably not. But again, I already gave you my opinion. I think that there is a sector in the porn industry out there that is above board. I think so. So can we consume porn ethically in a secular way? Yeah, I think we can. Just be mindful. Just be mindful. Now, again, I'm not endorsing or indicting. I'm just saying I think it's possible. I think it's possible. But understand, excess can lead to bigger problems. Excess can lead to emotional and mental issues that can potentially, and massive excess can rewire your brain, where you find no pleasure anymore. You have to chase pleasure now. And that is not Christian-like at all. You should be chasing, God's favor, not your physical pleasure. Again, it's a gift of God when it's done correct. It's a gift of God when it's done correctly. When it's done incorrectly, it takes focus away. Ethical consumption of pornography requires an awareness of the content, the source of the content, the performer conditions, and was this pornography literally, was it ethically produced, voluntary, fair? Yeah, was it? Because otherwise it can exploit vulnerable people, vulnerable women, and unfortunately out there, vulnerable children. So maintain some stability, some mental and emotional stability. Make informed choices. And then engage in a healthy way if you want to. Pornography. It's a complex issue, folks. It's complex and it's nuanced. It's complex and nuanced. You could go off you could branch off of any one of these little topics I touched on and just go on and on. Again, think about it critically, folks, and from whatever your value system is. Think about that. And if you're one of the Christians, one of those 54% or whatever, put it in perspective. At least put it in perspective and assess. Don't be willfully ignorant of the porn you consume. Now, look, good people, in my life, I've seen some bizarre shit. Be mindful of the things you consume. Hell, that applies to everything. Think critically and be mindful of all the things you consume. All right, good people. That was the topic of the day. Follow us on follow all the websites, ospreyshootingsolutions.com, twoteamguys.com, and thejuntopodcast.com. The Junto Podcast being on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple, Podbean, etc., etc., etc. Please give me your feedback. I always want your feedback, and you can do it via any of those platforms, or you can find me on Instagram, Osprey Shooting Solutions, Two Team Guys. And good people, help a homie emergency fund. Give, send, go. Pornography.com /help a homie fund. That is one of my efforts to amass some dollars to be able to help people that need it, that can't go through whatever formal channels, that don't qualify for whatever formal things, that need a little help. I'm not building houses for people. I'm trying to help somebody make a shortage up in their rent, or buy some diapers for their kid, or you know, get a Sam's Club pack of ramen so they don't starve to death, or help with a vehicle repair that's got them down so they can't get to work to catch 22. You know what I'm saying? When your transportation is down, you can't make the money. You can't make the money. You can't pay the bills. You can't pay the bills. You go to jail. So all of those things. Help a Homie Fund, folks. Please follow it. I do have an Instagram for that, but and the people that have donated so far, I appreciate you all. I know who you are, and I thank you, and I appreciate you. And for those of you out there who've got deep pockets, please consider it. GiveSendGo.com /help a homie fund. Eventually, the future of this Help a Homie Fund, I hope to make it a nonprofit to get bigger donations to be able to help more people. And then, you know, we'll do the board and we'll have all these things. Believe me, folks, I will be a good steward of your money, and I seek out the wisdom and guidance of people smarter than me. But folks, I'm at a point where I've given every month. I give all I can give financially. So I need help. Help me help others. Okay. Now that's all I got, folks. Take care. Thanks very much. Treat people well and have good manners. Have good manners. All right. I love you guys. Take care.